For 7 straight months, every night at exactly 2:47 in the morning, my husband would stand beside the bed, in the dark, just to watch me sleep. He did that until the night I pretended to be asleep and heard what he whispered. And child, what I discovered that night destroyed my life forever. My name is Loretta, Loretta Jean Matthews. Today, I am 91 years old. I was born on March 3rd, 1934, in Greenwood, Mississippi. I have lived through so many things in this life. I have been through things that, if I told them today, many people would say I made them up. But everything I am about to tell you children here is the complete truth, no more and no less. You can ask my daughters, my grandchildren, anyone who knows me. I have never lied in my life. Before we continue, Grandma wants to ask you who are watching one small thing. If you can click like and subscribe to Grandma's Diary, I will be very happy. People told me that helps my story reach more people. And I want this story to be known. I want other women to know that they are not alone. So if you can, please click like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. From Memphis, Jackson, or from Mississippi like me? Or from somewhere very far away in another country? Grandma really likes to know. My grandson always reads the comments to me, and I am moved when I find out my small story has touched people everywhere. Now I will start from the beginning, because if I don't, you won't understand why everything happened the way it did. I married Clyde Harrington on October 15th, 1955. People called him CC. Back then I was 21. He was 26. It was a marriage arranged by both families, like what was common in the countryside back then. My father knew his father. They were both deacons in a Baptist church and thought we were a good match. To be honest, I almost didn't know anything about Clyde before the wedding. We only met 3-4 times, and there were always parents sitting close by. He was tall, strong, hardworking. My father said he was a serious man, a man of his word, and that he would take good care of me. But when my father said that, he didn't know. He didn't know that Clyde Harrington was a man who lived in silence, not silence from being thoughtful, but the kind of silence of someone hiding something, even from himself. I got married in a white dress at the Baptist church in Greenwood. It was a big ceremony, lots of food, gospel music filling the whole church, and almost the entire congregation was there. I remember wearing the lace dress that had once belonged to my grandmother, the one my mother had kept in an old trunk for so many years. That day, the sun was blazing, and I was so nervous it felt like my heart was about to jump out of my chest. I truly didn't know anything about the man I was about to live with for the rest of my life. After the wedding, we moved into a small farm that his father gave us. About 50 acres of land near Greenwood, deep in the rural part of Leflore County, far away from everything. The house was wooden, simple, with only 3 rooms. A living room that doubled as the kitchen, 1 bedroom, and a small pantry room in the back. The bathroom was outside, an outhouse. There was no electricity. We used oil lamps. Water was drawn from the well in the yard. Clyde worked out in the fields. He grew corn, collard greens, sweet potatoes, raised a few chickens and pigs. I handled the housework, washed clothes by hand on a washboard, cooked on a wood stove, and sewed clothes for the whole family. It was a harsh life, but it was the life we knew. Everyone in that area lived like that back then. My first daughter was born in 1957 on April 23rd. I named her Asha because I liked that name. It sounded like something very beautiful. She was born at home with Miss Sebastiana, the midwife, the woman who delivered babies for the whole area. The labor was long and difficult. I was in a lot of pain. But when I saw my first daughter, I forgot everything. In 1959, Kenya was born on August 8th. Another difficult labor, but this time I already knew what I had to endure. Kenya was different from Asha. Asha was quiet, calm. Kenya was born already crying loudly, noisy, demanding attention from the very first second. And then in 1962, Sanaa was born, my youngest. She was born on December 1st. The labor was gentler, thank God. Sanaa was small, delicate, but very sharp and intelligent. 3 daughters, 3 girls. Clyde wanted a son. He wanted a boy to help him out in the fields, but God gave me 3 daughters. And I was grateful for every one of them. Clyde was always a quiet man. He wasn't the type to talk much, and he wasn't someone who knew how to show affection. He never beat me, never raised a hand to me. I have to say that to be fair. But he also never hugged me just to hug, never told me he loved me, never gave me a single gift, as if we were 2 strangers living under the same roof. He worked. I worked. We raised children. But there was nothing like the love of a married couple that you see in movies. There wasn't. Sometimes I wondered if all marriages were like that. I asked other women at church at gatherings, and they all said it was normal. The husband works. The wife takes care of the house. That's it. Love is for young girls who aren't married yet. After marriage, there is only duty, only obligation. But there was one thing I never told anyone. There was one thing I kept in my chest like a heavy stone placed right in the middle of it. I was lonely. Lonely in the worst way. Not lonely because I was alone, but lonely even while lying beside someone else. Lonely while watching that man eat, work, sleep right next to me, and feeling like he lived in a completely different world. I remember one night, probably around 1961, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Clyde was asleep. I heard his steady breathing, the crickets outside, the wind slipping through the cracks of the wooden window, and I thought, is this all there is? Is this my whole life? I wasn't resentful, just sad. Sad in a way with no tears left. Sad in a way that had become familiar. The girls grew up. Time passed. Life kept moving in that rhythm. Waking up early, brewing coffee, taking care of the house, taking care of the children, clothes, food. Clyde went to the fields before the sun rose, came back when it was almost dark, ate dinner in silence, went to bed. Then the next morning, it started again. I won't lie to you, I wasn't happy. But I also wasn't completely miserable. It was the life I had, and I accepted it. I had my daughters. I had food on the table. I had a roof over my head. Many people had less than that. Everything went on like that for 13 years. 13 years of a quiet marriage, no great joy, but no great disaster either, until January 1968 arrived. That January I will never forget. At the end of December, it rained a lot. The fields looked good. The corn grew well. Clyde was even less tense than usual. The girls were on school break. Asha was 11, and she helped me a lot around the house. Kenya was 9, at that mischievous age, climbing trees, getting all her clothes dirty. And Sanaa, 6, was still little but very perceptive. It was a Tuesday, January 16th, 1968. I remember clearly because the next day was a special prayer meeting at church, and I always lit candles for that. That day was completely normal. I got up early, brewed coffee. Clyde went to the fields. I stayed home with the girls. I cooked lunch, washed clothes. In the afternoon, I mended Kenya's torn dress. Then I cooked dinner, corn grits, collard greens, and a little leftover bacon. We ate. The girls went to bed early because they were tired from a day of playing in the sun. Clyde and I sat in the living room for a while. He smoked his pipe. I darned socks. Then we went to bed. Around 9 p.m., we lay down. I always slept on the left side of the bed against the wall. Clyde slept on the right, near the door. It had been that way since the day we married. The bed was wooden, old, creaking whenever you moved. The mattress was stuffed with corn husks, hard and uncomfortable, but that was what we had. I fell asleep. I slept normally. I was exhausted. It had been a long day. And then, in the middle of the night, I woke up. I woke suddenly, the way you wake when you feel something is wrong. That certain feeling that someone is watching you. I opened my eyes slowly, still half asleep. The house was pitch black. There was no moon that night. Everything was completely dark. But child, I saw his shadow, Clyde's shadow, standing beside the bed, just standing there, My heart started pounding wildly. I was so scared that for a moment I couldn't breathe. I thought it was a thief. I thought something terrible was happening. Then my eyes adjusted to the darkness, and I realized it was him. Clyde was standing on my side of the bed, watching me. I was too frightened to say anything. I just lay there. He stood still. No words, no movement, just staring. After a while, I don't know how long, maybe only a few minutes, he turned back to his side of the bed and lay down, as if nothing had happened. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, my heart pounding, my hands ice cold. I kept thinking about what had just happened. Why did he do that? Why did he stand there watching me like that? The next morning I pretended nothing happened. I brewed coffee. Everything was normal, but I watched him closely. He was the same as always, quiet, serious, eating biscuits with butter, drinking black coffee. I convinced myself it was just a dream, or that he had gotten up to use the bathroom and just happened to stop there. I didn't know. But the next night, it happened again. I woke in the middle of the night, and he was there, standing beside the bed, watching me. This time, I looked up at the wall clock, the old wind-up clock his father had given us. It read 2:47. 2:47 a.m. He stood there for about 10 minutes. I pretended to sleep, but I was completely awake. My heart was beating so hard I didn't understand how he couldn't hear it. Then he went back to bed. The next morning, over coffee, I asked, "Clyde, did you get up last night?" He looked at me like he didn't understand what I was talking about. "Get up for what? To use the bathroom or something?" "No, I slept all night." "Why?" "Nothing. I thought I heard a noise." And that was it. The subject closed. He didn't know, or he pretended he didn't know. I wasn't sure. But it happened again on the third night, then the fourth, the fifth, every single night at the exact same time. 2:47 a.m. I started losing weight. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I lived in exhaustion and tension. The girls noticed. Asha asked if I was sick. I said I was just tired, but she didn't believe me. I could see in her eyes that she knew something wasn't right. February passed. March, April, May, June, July. By early August, it had been 7 months. 7 months. Every night at exactly 2:47 in the morning, Clyde would wake up, stand beside my bed, watch me, then go back. I started thinking I was going crazy. I swear to God, I thought I was losing my mind. How could a man do that every day, at the same hour, and then the next morning act like nothing happened? I thought about it all day long, while washing clothes, while cooking, while sweeping the house. My mind never stopped, trying to understand what he was doing, and why. At first I thought he was sleepwalking. I had heard about people who wake up while asleep and wander around. Aunt Clara once said her husband went into the kitchen every night, opened the cabinet, and just stood there. But sleepwalkers don't stand in the exact same spot every day. And they don't do it at the exact same hour. 2:47, every day like a clock. Then I thought maybe it was an illness in the head. I had seen people like that. Mr. Jenkins at the grocery store had started talking to himself, seeing things that didn't exist. In the end, they had to take him to the hospital. Was Clyde like that too? I thought about telling someone. But who? The nearest house was Mr. Otis Landry's, almost a mile away. We had no telephone, nothing at all. To get into town, you had to ride a wagon for more than an hour. And what would I say? That my husband stood watching me sleep every night? They would think I was crazy. My mother lived in Greenwood, far. We only saw each other at Christmas or Easter. And even if I did see her, she would say, like always, "You married him, so you have to endure." Talking wouldn't help. I tried talking to the neighbors. One Sunday after church, I stood chatting with Miss Idella and Miss Sadie. I took a risk and asked, "Have you ever had any problems with your husband's sleep?" Miss Idella looked at me curiously. "What do you mean, Loretta?" "Oh, like getting up at night." Miss Sadie laughed. "My husband snores so loud he wakes up the whole neighborhood, but getting up is only to use the bathroom." And I couldn't say any more. I didn't have the courage. That's how small towns are. Everything becomes gossip. At home, things got worse and worse. I grew gaunt. My clothes hung loose. My face was hollow. Dark circles deep under my eyes. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize me. I looked like a ghost. The girls were worried. Asha kept asking. Kenya grew quiet. Sana clung to me. Clyde stayed the same, worked, stayed silent. Slept. And every early morning at 2:47, he stood beside my bed again. I began to truly be afraid. I had heard stories about men killing their wives in their sleep. I was afraid that one night he would stand there with a knife or a pillow. I didn't sleep. I lay awake watching the clock. 2:40, 2:45, 2:47. And he came. One night I pretended to be sound asleep. I breathed slow and deep. He stood there longer than usual, 15, 20 minutes. I heard his heavy breathing, the smell of tobacco in my face. I didn't know if he would kiss me or kill me. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it, but he did nothing. Then he went back to bed. That night, I didn't sleep again. The next day, I nearly fainted in the kitchen. Asha found me, panicked with worry. She helped me into the room, gave me sugar water, held my hand tight. In that moment, I almost told her. But I couldn't. She was too young. I was truly sick. I lost nearly 18 pounds in just 2 months. I, who had already been thin, was now nothing but skin and bones. Miss Idella saw me at the store and was horrified. She told me to go to a doctor, but the doctor was far and expensive, and I knew medicine wouldn't fix anything. The problem wasn't me. The problem was Clyde, and I didn't know what to do with him. And then one night I decided I would not hide anymore. I pretended to fall into a deep sleep, to listen, to know the truth. In the next part, I will tell you about the night Clyde knelt down beside my bed and whispered something no mother on earth is ever ready to hear. If you're still here, stay with Grandma, because from that moment, everything changed forever. I began watching Clyde during the day. I watched the way he looked at me. I paid attention to the way he spoke to the children. I tried to find a sign, anything at all, even something small, something abnormal that I could hold on to so I could understand what was happening. But Clyde was still always the same. Silent, serious, going out to the fields to work, coming home to eat, sitting for a while, then going to sleep, exactly like the past 10+ years. One Sunday, we went to church like we always did. We went every Sunday. In that rural place, it was mandatory. I sat on the wooden pew, my hands clasped together, my mouth praying, asking God to help me, asking God to protect my family. That day, the pastor preached about the devil tempting people, about evil things that can slip into a man's mind, about how a person can be pulled away from the light without realizing it. I left that church service and thought, maybe that was it. Maybe the devil was tempting Clyde, making him do those things. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but that was how I was raised. I grew up with that kind of faith. And when people are desperate, they can believe anything, as long as it gives them a spark of hope. That night, I put a Bible under my pillow. I prayed every night before sleeping. I asked for protection, but it didn't work. 2:47. He was still there. Then I began to realize my daughters were changing too. They were getting quieter and quieter. And Kenya was the one who worried me the most. I noticed she was losing weight too. Her little face grew thinner. Her clothes hung looser on her body. I asked if she was eating at school. "Yes, Mama." "Are you sure? You've gotten so skinny." "Yes, I'm eating, Mama." "I just don't really have much appetite." It sounded strange, but I didn't press. My head was full of other things. I couldn't carry every worry at once. I thought maybe it was just a phase, or she had worms, or she was tired from running around. Until one day, it must have been late July, early August. Kenya came home from school and went straight into the bedroom. She didn't want to eat. She said her stomach hurt. I went in to check on her. She was curled up, both hands holding her belly so small it broke my heart. "What did you eat, Kenya?" "Nothing, Mama. I didn't eat anything unusual." "Do you have a fever?" I put my hand to her forehead. "No fever." "No, Mama, it just hurts. I'll make you some tea." I made her a little peppermint tea. I brought it to her. She drank. She lay there silent. I left the room, but my chest felt heavy. It wasn't until I brought dinner in for her that I finally saw clearly. Kenya had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Kenya, did you cry? What is it?" "It's nothing, Mama. It's just the pain." But I knew. I knew it wasn't just stomach pain. I stood there looking at her, and for the first time in months, I stopped thinking about Clyde. I truly looked at my daughter. Kenya was different, not only thinner. But the way she acted, the way she looked at me, the way she answered, there was something in her eyes, like fear. And what made me go cold was I didn't know what she was afraid of. I tried to draw her out, but she didn't want to talk. She said she was sleepy. She wanted to sleep. I left the room, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the girls. Asha was worried about me, looking at me with the eyes of a child who had grown up too fast. Kenya was strange, thin and terrified. And Sana, poor thing, clung to me all day long, as if the moment she let go, I would disappear. What was happening to my family? And then 247 came again. Clyde got up like always, came to my side like always, stood there like always. But this time, the strangest thing was, I wasn't afraid. I had a kind of courage I didn't know where it came from. A courage so big I felt like I wanted to jump up and scream right in his face. "What are you doing, Clyde? Why are you destroying this family?" But I didn't scream. I stayed still. I pretended to sleep like always. When he went back to bed, I lay there and thought hard. I couldn't live like this for one more night. I needed to find out what was happening. I needed to hear what he was doing while he stood there, because he couldn't just stand and watch me in silence for 7 months without a reason. That was when the idea came to me. I would still pretend to sleep, but this time I would do it perfectly. I would breathe deep and slow, like someone sleeping soundly. I would lie completely still. I would make Clyde believe I had sunk into the deepest sleep. And I would be silent. Silent enough to hear anything at all. If he spoke, if his breathing changed, if he made any sound, anything. I carved one specific day into my mind. Monday, August 12th, 1968. That day, I would find out the truth. There are times in life when a person stands before two choices. One is to keep pretending you don't know, to keep living in the dark, just to preserve a fake peace. The other is to accept that the truth might kill you, but still you have to open your eyes and look. I had lived my whole life in duty, in silence, in endurance. But that night, thinking about Kenya curled up with swollen red eyes, I understood one thing very clearly. If I kept my eyes closed, I wouldn't just lose myself. I would lose my children. I spent the whole Sunday wound tight as a wire. I didn't go to church. I said I felt sick. I stayed home, thinking and planning. Clyde went out with the girls. I stayed behind alone. I went into the bedroom and looked at that old, creaking wooden bed. The bed where I slept every day, and the place where I woke every night at 2:47 to see my man standing there. Tomorrow, I would know the truth. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But I knew one thing for certain. I needed to know. That Sunday night, I ate dinner very early, washed up, then lay down early around 8 o'clock. I said I had a headache. Clyde stayed in the living room smoking. The girls went to sleep. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house, the creak of wood, the wind hitting the window, the crickets in the yard. Clyde came to bed around 9. He lay on his side like always, silent. I kept my eyes open, heart racing, palms sweating. I couldn't mess up. I couldn't slip. I couldn't drift off. I had to hear. In the end, I did fall asleep, but only a light sleep, heavy with nightmares. I dreamed strange things. I dreamed of Clyde. I dreamed of the girls. I dreamed the house was on fire. Then I woke with a jolt and looked at the clock. 2:30. I had 15 minutes. 15 minutes to uncover the truth. I lay completely still, my body stiff as a board. Then I forced myself to relax little by little. I knew if I was too tense, Clyde would notice. It had to look like I was truly asleep. I breathed deep, slow. I let the air slip out through my mouth very softly. I loosened both arms. I turned my body slightly into the position I usually slept in. I closed my eyes. I relaxed my face, my shoulders, my legs. I lay like that, breathing evenly, trying to become a woman sleeping soundly. Clyde lay on the other side of the bed. I heard his breathing. It sounded like he was asleep, but I wasn't sure. Was he truly asleep, or was he awake too, and waiting? Time passed so slowly it was unbelievable. Every second stretched like an hour. I wanted to look at the clock, but I couldn't. I had to keep pretending. The silence was heavy like a blanket pressing down on the house. Only the wind outside, Clyde's breathing, and my breathing. My heart pounded so hard I was afraid he would hear it. It beat like a drum inside my chest. Boom, boom, boom. I tried to calm myself. I thought of peaceful things, the garden, the chickens in the yard, the girls playing. But I couldn't, because I knew it was time. Suddenly, I heard the bed creak. Clyde moved. I stayed still, eyes still closed, breathing still deep. I heard him sit up. The mattress sank on his side as he braced himself with his hand. The bed groaned as if it aged 10 more years. He stood up. I waited, and he came. I heard footsteps moving very slowly across the wooden floor. Creak, squeak, creak, slow, careful, like someone who didn't want to make a sound. He stopped at my side of the bed. I felt him there, so close my skin prickled. I kept breathing deep and slow, pretending I was sound asleep. Clyde stood there like he always did. Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the weight of his stare pressing on my face. My heart sprinted, out of control. I tried to keep it from showing. He stood there. How long? I don't know. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. It felt like a whole lifetime. Then he moved. I heard a sound as if he bent down, then knelt down. Lord. He knelt beside the bed. I stayed still, breathing evenly, pretending. And then, child, he began to speak. Clyde's voice was very small, very weak, like a breath that had been snapped in half. I had to strain my ears to hear. I'm sorry, Loretta. He said my name. I'm sorry, Loretta. Forgive me. Forgive what? He kept whispering, his voice broken, trembling. Forgive me for what I did, for what I promised. I shouldn't have done that. My whole body was rigid, but I still had to stay still. I needed to hear, I needed to understand. I was desperate, Loretta. I was afraid. The debt was too big. I had no way to pay it. A debt? What debt? Then I heard him crying, a strangled cry, like a man trying to swallow his tears down his throat so no one would hear. $3,000. $3,000. I don't have it. I don't have it. And he'll kill me, Loretta. Virgil Sutter will kill me. Virgil Sutter, the wealthy landowner, a widower. My blood turned to ice. So I promised, Clyde said, as if he were about to choke. God forgive me. I promised our daughter, our Kenya. No, 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 no. No, he promised my daughter, Kenya. A 9-year-old child. When she turns 15, she will marry him. That's what I promised, to pay the debt, to save my life. I wanted to scream. To bolt upright, to grab Clyde by the throat and squeeze until he couldn't breathe. But I stayed still, because I knew I needed to hear everything. Everything. He kept crying, sobbing. That was the morning of January 16th. I lost everything gambling poker at Big Joe's place. Everything, Loretta. All the money we saved. And I still owed $3,000 to Mr. Sutter. He gambled away our money. The money I worked myself to the bone sewing to earn. The money we saved for hard times. He gambled it all away. I came home that morning wanting to die. wanting to hang myself, wanting to disappear, but then he showed up here at the house the next day, Mr. Sutter, and he made an offer. What offer? What offer? He said he would forgive the entire debt if I promised Kenya's hand when she turned 15. He was 52, Loretta. 52, and our daughter was 9 years old. I trembled inside, shaking with rage, with horror, with disgust. I said yes. God forgive me. I said yes because I was afraid. Afraid he would kill me. Afraid of losing everything. I'm a coward, Loretta. I'm a coward. That was why he came every morning. 2:47, the moment he made the promise, the moment he sold our daughter. Since that day he hadn't slept well. Every day he woke up at that hour and came here. He came to beg me to forgive him because he knew that when I found out, I would never forgive him. Never. He was right. I would never forgive him. But I didn't have the courage to tell you. I didn't have the courage to see your face when you knew, to see Kenya's face when she knew her father had promised her to an old man. My Kenya, my baby acting strange, thin, afraid. She knew. Someone must have told her. He kept crying, his voice sinking lower, breaking more. 6 more years. 6 years until she turns 15, and then I'll have to give her. I'll have to hand my daughter over to Virgil Sutter like she's livestock, like she's a thing. No, that would not happen. I would not allow it. Forgive me, Loretta. Forgive me for being too cowardly, too weak, too sinful. He stayed there longer, crying softly, whispering words I couldn't fully make out, begging forgiveness, begging God, begging me. Then he stood up. I heard him rise. I heard his footsteps go back toward his side of the bed. I heard the bed creak when he lay down. I lay there still motionless, eyes still closed, breath still pretending sleep. But inside me, I had shattered. Shattered as if someone had torn my heart out of my chest and stomped on it. My daughter, my Kenya. Promised to an old man to pay off a gambling debt. I waited. I waited until I was certain he had fallen asleep. His breathing grew heavy, deep. Only he could sleep. Then I opened my eyes. The house was dark, everything black, but my eyes had adjusted. I stared at the ceiling, the old wooden ceiling of our home. Everything made sense now. Kenya was strange because she knew. Someone had told her, or she had overheard. Children hear everything. She knew her father had promised her in marriage. My 9-year-old child, knowing that in 6 years she would have to marry a 52-year-old man, who would be 58 by then. An old man who could be her grandfather. I thought about all the times I'd seen her quiet, thin, afraid, and I had thought it was a phase, just a child's thing. How blind I had been. How did I not see it? Because I was worried about Clyde, about him watching me at dawn. I was so focused on my own fear. I didn't see the fear in my daughter. I lay there the rest of the night without sleeping, only thinking, planning. I would not let it happen. Never. Clyde could have promised whatever he wanted. Virgil Sutter could think he had a right to my daughter. I would not allow it. I watched dawn begin to creep through the crack of the window, light slowly seeping in, the rooster crowing outside, the chickens starting to cluck. I got out of bed carefully without making a sound. Clyde was still asleep, or pretending to sleep. It didn't matter. I went into the kitchen, lit the wood stove, boiled water for coffee, and stood there watching the flame, watching it dance. My mind wouldn't stop, thinking. I needed to get my children out of there. We needed to leave. But where? I had no money. I had nothing. How would I feed 3 children on my own? I thought about going back to my mother's house in Greenwood, but my mother was old, sick, and couldn't take care of me and 3 granddaughters. I thought about my sister, Denise Corbin. She lived in Memphis with more resources. Would she take me in? I made the coffee and set the table. Biscuits, butter, peach jam I had made. The girls woke up and came into the kitchen. Asha rubbing her eyes, Sana yawning, Kenya. I looked at Kenya, at her small face, at her eyes, and she looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw it. I saw that she knew I knew. How did she know? I didn't know, but she knew. I hugged her. I hugged my child tight. "Are you okay, Mama?" Asha asked. "Yes, baby, I'm okay." But I wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. Clyde appeared, came into the kitchen, sat at the table, picked up a biscuit, spread butter on it like it was a normal day. I looked at him, looked straight into his eyes, and he looked away. He couldn't face me. He knew I knew. Somehow, he knew. I let the girls drink their coffee. I talked to them about ordinary things, about school, about the chickens, about what they would play today. Then I looked at Asha. "Asha, you and your sisters will spend the whole day at Aunt Denise's." Asha looked at me surprised. "Today, Mama? But Aunt Denise lives in Memphis." "We'll see if Mr. Landry can take you part of the way to catch the bus. I'll take you this morning. You'll stay there a few days." "But Mama, why?" "Because I need to handle some things here." "Grown-up things. You go there and have fun with your cousins, okay?" I looked at Clyde. He went pale, white as paper. He knew what was about to happen. I packed a bundle of the girls' clothes, a few changes, toothbrushes, a comb. I put it all into a bag. I took all 3 of their hands. "Come on." "But Mama, how are we going?" "It's far. We'll go by wagon. I'll ask Mr. Landry to take us to the Greyhound station." I went to Mr. Landry's house. He was the closest neighbor we had. He had a truck. I asked him to take the girls to the bus station in Jackson. He looked at me a little suspicious, but I insisted. I said it was urgent, that I would pay him. He agreed. I settled the girls. Asha, Kenya, Sanaa. All 3 sat there looking at me. "Be good at Aunt Denise's house, okay?" "Yes, ma'am." "Listen to your aunt. Be polite." "Yes, Mama." I hugged each one, tight, breathed in their hair, storing that moment because I didn't know when I would see them again. The truck pulled away. I watched them go, waving at me. I waved back until they disappeared down the dirt road. I turned back to the house, went inside, closed the door. Clyde was sitting in the living room, staring down at the floor. I looked at him, and he looked at me. And in that moment, without me saying anything, he knew. He knew I had heard. That I knew everything, and he knew nothing would ever be the same again. We stood there, me standing, him sitting, the silence between us heavy like a boulder. I didn't say anything. There was no need. He knew. I saw him begin to tremble. His hands trembled, his shoulders trembled, and then he began to cry, truly cry, loud, unhidden. "Loretta, don't call my name." My voice was cold, hard. I had never spoken like that to him, to anyone. He lowered his head, kept crying. "You heard?" "You heard what I said this morning?" That wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I heard every word you whispered while you thought I was asleep. For 7 months, you came to my side every morning asking forgiveness. But you never had the courage to tell me when I was awake." "I can't." "You can't what, Clyde? You can't say you sold our daughter? That you promised Kenya, a 9-year-old child, to a 52-year-old man?" He sobbed, an ugly, desperate sound. "I was desperate, Loretta." "The debt. I know about the debt. You gambled away our money, the money I saved by sewing, washing, going hungry. You took it all and gambled it on cards." I went into the kitchen. I took the knife I used to cut meat. I went back into the living room. When he saw the knife in my hand, he went pale. He raised his hands. "Loretta, Lord, don't—" "I'm not going to kill you, Clyde, even though you deserve it. But I want you to sit there and tell me everything from the beginning. And if you lie to me one word, just one word, I swear to God I will finish you." I sat in the chair across from him. I set the knife on the table, but I kept my hand on it. "Talk." He took a deep breath, wiped his tears with the back of his hand. It was the night of January 15th, a Tuesday night. Big Joe was hosting a game in the back of his place. Poker. I went. I'd gone other times. Small games. Sometimes I won. Sometimes I lost. "Yes, I know. I know you played sometimes, but I thought it was something small. Just a few cents." That night there were men from out of town, rich men, landowners, a big game, big stakes. And He stopped, took another deep breath. I thought I would win. I thought I would double our money, triple it. I would buy more land, more livestock. I would improve our life. You took all our money. I took the $300 we saved. All of it. $300. 2 years of saving, 2 years of me sewing late into the night after the girls fell asleep, after he fell asleep, sewing until my fingers bled. And he took it all in one night and lost it. I lost everything in the first few hands, and then I got desperate. I begged to borrow. Sutter was there. He lent me $1,000. You borrowed $1,000? Yes. I thought I would win back what I'd lost. I would win it back. But you didn't win. I didn't win. I lost another $1,000. So I asked for more. Another $1,000. He lent it and I lost it. I asked for another $1,000. I lost it. By the end of the night, I owed Virgil Sutter $3,000. $3,000. A fortune. Money we had never even seen. He gave me 1 week. 1 week to come up with $3,000. If not, he would take the land, the house, everything. You should have told me. I was going to tell you. I swear. But the next day, Saturday, he showed up here early in the morning. You had gone to wash clothes at the creek with the girls. He came on horseback. Virgil Sutter came here. He came. He walked in here, sat in the very chair you're sitting in, lit a cigar, and said he had an offer for me. What offer? He said he'd been a widower for 3 years, that he was looking for a young girl to marry. A young girl who could bear him children, take care of his house. And he had noticed Kenya, that he'd seen her at church, at picnics. My stomach twisted. That old man had been watching my daughter. A child. And then? Then he made the offer. He said if I promised Kenya's hand when she turned 15, he would forgive the entire debt, $3,000, all forgiven. And you agreed. It wasn't like that, Loretta. I said no. I told him she was a child, that she was my daughter, but in the end, you agreed. He threatened me. He said if I didn't agree, it wouldn't just be the debt. He said he would do something to me, that I would disappear. That you and the girls would have nothing. No land, no house, no husband. So you'd rather sell our daughter? I didn't sell her. I only promised. That's the same thing. You promised her hand like she was an object, like livestock. Like you had the right to decide her life. I screamed. I screamed loud. All the anger I had held down exploded at once. He lowered his head and kept crying. I know I was wrong. That's why I can't sleep. That's why every day at 2:47 a.m. I wake up. Because that was 2:47 a.m. from Friday into Saturday when I said yes. When I promised Kenya. What was it like? Tell me exactly what it was like. He gave me paper and a pen. He ordered me to write. He stopped, swallowed. I, Clyde Harrington, promise my daughter Kenya Matthews in marriage to Mr. Virgil Sutter when she turns 15 on August 8th, 1974, 6 years from now. And you signed? I signed. And he signed as witness. He kept the paper, said he would keep it until that day, that when 1974 came, he would come to collect her. I stood up from the chair. I began pacing back and forth across the living room, trying to think, trying to control my rage. Kenya knows. He looked at me with wide eyes. How does she know? She knows, Clyde. I can see it in her eyes. She's thin, scared, quiet. Someone told her. No, I didn't tell anyone. Only me and Virgil Sutter know. Then he told, or someone at Big Joe's place that night heard. It's a small town. People know everything. Someone heard. Someone talked, and it reached her. Lord, my baby. His voice broke again. I stopped pacing. I looked at him. You will take paper and pen right now, and you will write a statement that you cancel that promise. That it was made under threat, under pressure, and it has no value at all. But he has the paper, Loretta. He has my signature. It doesn't matter. You will write right now that you cancel it. and I will take it to Virgil Sutter, and I will tell him to his face that my daughter is not merchandise. But he won't accept it. He'll come here. I don't care what he does. My daughter will not marry that old man. I grabbed paper and pen and threw them in front of him. Write, right now. He took the pen with a trembling hand. He began to write. I dictated for him. I, Clyde Harrington, by this letter, cancel the promise made to Mr. Virgil Sutter regarding the marriage of my daughter Kenya Matthews. The said promise was made under coercion and threat and is therefore invalid. I acknowledge that I have committed a grave mistake, and my daughter has the right to choose her own future. He wrote. The handwriting slanted, shaking. He signed at the bottom. I took the paper, folded it, put it into my pocket. Now you stay here. You do not leave this house. You don't go out to the fields. You don't go anywhere. You stay here and wait for me to come back. Where are you going? I'm going to handle this the way it needs to be handled. Loretta, don't go there. It's dangerous. So am I. I took my shawl, pulled it over my shoulders, took the paper. I left the house, closed the door. Started walking. Virgil Sutter's plantation was about 5 miles from there, 5 miles of dirt road. It would take more than 2 hours to walk, but I would go. I would walk if I had to. I had been walking for about 15 minutes when I heard the sound of horse hooves behind me. I turned around. It was Mr. Landry. He was on his way into town. He pulled back on the reins and looked at me under the blazing sun. Miss Loretta, where are you walking to in this heat? I swallowed hard, but I tried to keep my voice calm. I'm going to Virgil Sutter's place. Mr. Landry's eyes widened, as if he couldn't believe he'd heard right. But it's a long way, ma'am. Get in the wagon. I'll take you. I climbed up onto the seat, the bag in my hand light as air yet heavy as stone. We rolled along the dirt road, the wheels screeching dry and harsh. Mr. Landry didn't ask another question. That was what I had always appreciated about him. He wasn't the curious type. He helped when people needed it, and then he let them keep the rest for themselves. Virgil Sutter's plantation appeared like a different world. A tall wooden gate, a long stretch of white fence, a gravel drive leading straight to a large 2-story house, pillars as thick as church columns, workers moving about, horses, barns, things that someone like me only had to look at once to know. He had everything. Mr. Landry stopped the wagon at the gate. He turned to me, lowering his voice. Are you sure, Miss Loretta? I nodded. Yes, thank you, Mr. Landry. I stepped down. He didn't say anything else, just gave a small nod, then drove off, leaving me standing alone in front of a gate taller than my fear. I opened the gate and stepped in. Gravel crunched under my shoes. Every step felt like stepping into the mouth of a huge beast. I walked straight to the porch, climbed the steps one by one, and knocked. A servant opened the door, a black man, elderly, with hair white as cotton. I want to speak to Mr. Sutter. Do you have an appointment? I don't need an appointment. Tell him it's Loretta, Clyde Harrington's wife. He looked me up and down, his eyes stopping on my old dress, my thin body, my hands trembling slightly from the heat and from tension. I knew what he was thinking. A poor woman showing up at the master's house, nothing more than a lost shadow. But he still went inside. I stood waiting on the porch. My heart pounded. Sweat ran down my spine. Then I heard heavy footsteps. Virgil Sutter appeared. He was big, pot-bellied, with a thick mustache, gray hair, expensive clothes. On his wrist, a gold watch glittered in the sun, as if to remind me who had the power. He looked at me, slightly surprised. Mrs. Harrington, it's an honor to welcome you here. Come in, please. I didn't move. I'm not coming in. I came to settle something quickly. He spread a wide, toothy smile, but there was no warmth in it. It looked like a trap. I understand. I suppose I know what you're here about. Your husband sent you to confirm the arrangements we've made. I pulled the paper from my pocket. My hand still shook, but my eyes did not back down. I came to destroy the arrangements you and he made. The smile on his face died instantly. What did you say? I held the paper out in front of him. My husband wrote this. Canceling the promise. My daughter is not merchandise. Kenya will not marry you." He snatched the paper and read it. His face slowly reddened with anger, like a coal furnace being fanned hard. "This isn't worth anything." "I have a document signed by him. Legal. Witnessed. That document was made under coercion and threats. It has no value." He curled his lip. "It has value. And it will be carried out. In 1974, I will come to collect the girl." I felt blood rush into my ears, but I said it clearly, word by word. "You will not come, because if you come near my daughter, I will kill you with my own hands." He burst out laughing. Loud, roaring, mocking laughter. "You? What will you do? You're just a woman, a poor black woman with nothing at all." There are moments in life when you realize fear doesn't disappear because you beg it to. Fear only disappears when you step straight into its face and say no. I had lived my whole life in silence, in endurance, in "don't make a fuss." But standing on Virgil Sutter's porch that day, I understood one thing. If I stepped back, the one dragged out to pay the debt would not be Clyde. It would be Kenya, and I would rather die than let that happen. I stepped forward one pace and looked straight into his eyes. I am a mother, and a mother protects her children, no matter what it takes. His laughter stopped. He stared at me as if, for the first time, he understood. I wasn't here to beg. "Your husband owes me $3,000, he said, his voice dropping dark. "He lost it gambling. That's his problem, not my daughter's. The agreement has been made. There is no agreement." My voice was hard as a nail driven in. "My daughter is not part of any agreement. And if you keep insisting—" I drew a deep breath, then let it all out, because I knew I only had to make him fear for his reputation. "I will go everywhere, to the sheriff, to the pastor, to the judge. I will create the biggest scandal this county has ever seen. I will tell the whole world that you, a 52-year-old man, want to marry a 9-year-old child. I will spread it across this town, across this state. Then we'll see if your reputation can survive." His face turned purple with rage. "You have no proof." "I have my husband's word. I have what you forced him to promise. And I have my daughter, the child who has been terrified for months because someone told her." He stepped closer, trying to use his big body to intimidate me. But I didn't back up. I stood firm. "I won't forget this debt," he hissed through his teeth. "Your husband will pay one way or another." "Then collect it from him, not from my daughter." I turned my back and started down the steps. "You will regret this, Mrs. Harrington." I stopped, turned my head to look at him. "I won't regret it. The one who will regret it is you if you come near my family." I left the plantation, closed the gate behind me. My legs were shaking then. My whole body shook like a leaf, but I had done it. I had stood in front of that man and said no. I started walking back home. The sun burned straight down on my head. My legs were weak. But I kept going, walking, until I couldn't stand it anymore. I dropped down by the roadside under a pecan tree, and I cried. I cried out everything I had held in. 7 months of fear, 7 months of desperation, 7 months of not understanding what was happening inside my own house. I cried for Kenya, for a childhood being priced and bargained, for the fear she had carried in her body for months. I cried for Clyde, for his weakness, his cowardice, for a marriage that had never truly been a marriage, for 13 years of living beside a man I could not reach. I cried for myself, for the exhausted, thin, terrified woman I had become. I sat there a long time, until the tears ran out, until I could breathe again. Then I stood up, wiped my face, and kept walking. When I got home, it was nearly evening. The light was fading. Clyde was still sitting exactly where I had left him that morning, staring at the wall like a shadow. When he saw me step inside, he jumped to his feet. "What did he say?" "He said he won't let it go, that you will have to pay the debt, one way or another. He'll come for me." "I don't know," I said, my voice dry and hollow. And I don't care. I walked straight into the bedroom. I pulled out an old bag and started stuffing my clothes into it, then the girls' clothes. Clyde froze. What are you doing? I'm leaving, I said, not stopping my hands. I'm going to get the girls, and I'm going to Memphis. I'll stay with my sister until I figure out how to support myself. No, Loretta, don't do this. You think I'm going to stay here and live with you after what you've done? I'll find a way to pay the debt, he said quickly. I swear. I don't want to know about the debt, I answered. I want to know about protecting my daughters, and with you nearby, they're not protected. I closed the bag. I bent down and took the money I had hidden under the mattress. About $20, pitiful, but it was all I had. You can't leave, Clyde said, clinging to the words like they were the only thing he had. You're my wife. I looked at him. Not anymore. I grabbed the bag and walked straight to the door. Clyde followed behind me. Loretta, please, forgive me. Give me a chance. I turned back. You've had 7 months of chances, I said, each word like a blade. 7 months to tell the truth. 7 months to do the right thing, and you didn't. I opened the door. I'm going to get my daughters, and I will never come back. And I left. I left the house that night, Monday night, August 12th, 1968, with a bag of clothes on my back and $20 in my pocket. That was everything I had in this world. Everything, except my 3 daughters. I walked through the dark to Mr. Landry's house again. I knocked. He opened the door in his nightclothes, rubbing his eyes, still not understanding what was happening. Mr. Landry, I need to go get my daughters. I need to get to the bus station. Now? He looked at me, saw the bag on my back, saw my face, saw something broken in my eyes. And he didn't ask anything else. He only said, I'll start the truck. We drove through the night. The road was pitch black. Only the headlights swept a thin stripe of light across the ground. I sat clutching the bag tight, staring straight ahead, not turning around, not looking back at the house, not looking back at Clyde, not looking back at 13 years of my life. We reached the station. I got on a bus to Memphis. I arrived as the sun was just coming up. Tuesday morning, August 13th. Denise, my sister, opened the door and went still when she saw me there at that hour. Loretta, what happened? I tightened my grip on the bag strap. I need to stay here a few days, sis. And the girls, I have to go get them from the station. Denise looked at the bag, looked at my face, and understood. Come in. I went to get the girls. When we returned to Denise's house, a small but tidy house, 2 bedrooms, a living room and a kitchen, she lived there with her husband Robert and their 2 children, John and Mary, about the same age as my girls. I sat down at the kitchen table like someone who had just walked through a storm. Denise made coffee, set it in front of me, then handed me a biscuit. Tell me. And I told her. I told her everything from the beginning. 2:47 in the morning. 7 months. The night I pretended to sleep. What Clyde had done. The promise. Virgil Sutter. All of it. Denise went pale. Then her face flushed red with anger. That bastard! That... When I finished, I took a sip of coffee and drew a deep breath. I'm not going back, Denise, I said. I'm not going back to him. I'll stay here until I figure out how to support myself and the girls. Denise took my hand. You can stay as long as you need. My girls were sitting right there, and when they saw me cry, Kenya ran to me and wrapped her arms around me tight, so tight I almost fell. Mama! Just one word, but the way she said it, I knew. She understood. She knew I went there to protect her. Asha and Sana ran in too and hugged me. All 3 clung to me as if they let go, everything would fall back into darkness. I held my daughters and cried. I cried from relief, from exhaustion, from fear, from everything I had swallowed down for 7 months. We stayed at Denise's house, day after day, then week after week, then month after month. I slept on a mattress laid on the living room floor. The girls slept in the room with John and Mary. And slowly, very slowly, we began to build a new life again. A life without fear. A life without 2:47 in the morning. A life of freedom. The first months in Memphis were hard, but in a completely different way. No longer hard because of fear. Hard because I had to rebuild everything from the beginning, from zero, with my own two hands. I started looking for work. My first job was doing laundry for white families in South Memphis. I worked from early morning until late at night. My hands cracked from soap. My back ached from bending over the wash tubs again and again. But that was my money. Money I earned with my own two hands, without asking anyone's permission, without tiptoeing around anyone's moods, without holding my breath while living in someone else's house. Later, I found sewing work at a small tailor shop on Beale Street. The owner was Mrs. Eleanor Washington, a black woman, the kind who only had to look into your eyes to know what you'd been through. She didn't ask many questions. She just looked at my hands, watched how I kept my stitches straight, then said one short sentence, firm as a stamp, "Start Monday." My daughters went to school in the neighborhood. For the first time in their lives, they studied in a school with enough books, with teachers who didn't have to teach 4 grades at once in one room. Such small things, but to me, it felt like a new door opening. Kenya changed slowly, not overnight, not the kind of change where fear just suddenly disappears, but week by week, little by little. I saw her eat a bit more. I saw her smile come more easily, and then laughter. Oh, Lord, her laughter. It began to return. One afternoon, about 6 months after we arrived in Memphis, I came home early from the tailor shop. Before I even stepped inside, I heard laughter coming from the backyard. Kenya was playing with Mary, Denise's daughter. The 2 girls were jumping rope, singing the songs children sing. I stood still at the window watching. Kenya's face was rosy. Her eyes were bright. Her body moved freely, as if no one had ever tried to trap her future inside a gambling debt. And in that moment, I knew. I knew for certain, deep in my chest, I had made the right decision. Clyde never came to Memphis. I don't know if he ever looked for us, and I don't care. Denise once said that if Clyde showed up, her husband Robert would handle it, but Clyde never came. Later, I heard from someone in Greenwood that Clyde had sold the land to pay part of the debt to Virgil Sutter. He moved to another town and worked as a hired laborer. I never learned anything more, and I never wanted to. As for Virgil Sutter, the man died in 1971 from a stroke. When I heard the news, I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad either. I just felt relieved. Relieved that he no longer existed in this world to threaten any other little girl. I never remarried. Some people asked why. I always answered simply, I don't need a man to feel whole. I have my daughters. I have my work. I have my freedom. That is enough. Asha grew up and became a nurse. She works at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis, caring for sick children. Once she said to me, "Mom, you taught me that protecting the vulnerable is the most important thing." Kenya, my Kenya, the daughter a man once thought he could buy with a gambling debt, went to college and became a teacher. She teaches at a public school in Memphis, teaching poor black children like she once was. She married at 25, when she was ready, to a good man she chose herself. They have 3 children, and Sanaa, my baby Sanaa, became a lawyer. She works helping women escape abusive marriages. She once told me, "You showed me that a woman can be brave, that she can say no." Today, at 91 years old, when I look back on my life, I have no regrets. Yes, I lost 13 years to a man who did not love me. Yes, I endured 7 months of fear without understanding what was happening. Yes, I had to start over with $20 and 3 children, but I got out. I protected my daughters. And that is all that matters. I want you, especially the young women watching me, to remember a few things. First, if you feel that something is wrong, trust your instincts. Your body knows. Your mind knows. Do not let anyone tell you that you're imagining things. Second, If someone, your husband, your boyfriend, your family, makes you afraid, makes you lose weight, makes you unable to sleep, that is not love. That is control, and you have the right to leave. Third, your children are not property. No one, and I mean no one, has the right to make decisions about their bodies or their futures except themselves when they are grown. Fourth, never stay in a dangerous situation just because you think there is no other way. There is always a way. It may not be easy, but there is always a way. And finally, you are stronger than you think. I was a poor black woman in Mississippi in 1968. I had no power, no money, no education, but I had love for my daughters. And that love was enough to give me the courage to face a powerful man, to leave everything I had ever known, and to start over. If I could do that, so can you. 7 months at 2:47 in the morning changed my life, but not in the way people think. It exposed betrayal. It stripped away cowardice. It showed me that the man I married was not the man I thought he was, but it also showed me that I was stronger than I ever knew, that a mother's love is stronger than any fear, that freedom is worth fighting for. Today, my daughters are all alive, healthy, and happy. They have families of their own. They live lives they chose for themselves. Kenya, the daughter a man once thought he could own, now stands in a classroom teaching other young girls that they have value, that they have the right to say no. And that, my dear ones, that is how we turn pain into purpose. That is how we turn darkness into light. If my story helps even one person, a woman, a girl, a mother, find the courage to protect herself or her children, then those 7 months were not wasted. Thank you for listening to an old woman's story. And if you want to hear more true stories like this, stories of women who stood up, who escaped, who survived and rebuilt their lives, then please subscribe to the channel Grandma's Diary and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next episode. You can also share this video with a friend, a sister, a younger woman, someone you think needs to hear it. And remember this, my dear, you are never alone, and you are stronger than you think. God bless you. Until we meet again.